Hello, my name's Harry, and the video you're about to watch is my trip report for my trip to Southeast Asia, where we traveled to Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia at the end of 2024 into 2025. All opinions expressed here are my own, and hopefully you learn something and you enjoy this video. My expectations for this trip were pretty simple. I've been to Thailand with my family as a kid and Vietnam a few years back, so I knew the basics, Southeast Asia, temples, and a whole lot of history. Cheap food, cheap hotels, that sort of thing. Preparation was minimal, to say the least. A friend's GP mom recommended some vaccines, but beyond that I did very little research, and my friends did even less. We just booked flights, our hotels, and locked in a couple of must-dos like seeing elephants in Thailand. Our only fixed plan was being in Phuket for New Year's, since a friend had some people there that she wanted to see at a beach party. Since leaving New Zealand costs an arm and a leg, no matter where you go, I was determined to see more than one country.
It's up there now.
Vietnam got added because my friend's parents were there and I'd always wanted to see Angkor Wat, so Cambodia was a must as well. Indonesia became our rest stop to break up the long flight home, and Malaysia was a 24-hour layover bonus we planned on the fly. We thought about going overland from Thailand to Cambodia and Vietnam, but the visa process and long travel times made flying a much better deal. It was only slightly more expensive and bought us a lot more time. Speaking of visas, that's a lesson learned. My Vietnam visa was approved with the wrong details, namely my name, and my friend only realized hers was wrong once we were already in the country. So she had to spend nearly $500 and a massive headache getting it all sorted out. Next time I am triple checking everything, including other people's visas. The constant haggling and hassling, especially in Vietnam and Indonesia, took me off guard. It's second nature for locals, clearly, but totally foreign to me. Still, I appreciate how polite people try to be, even when they're pushing for a sale. But the food was the highlight everywhere. Thailand, it's impossible to find a bad meal. Even 7-Eleven was solid, the $1 meat skewers and $2.50 chicken plates were unforgettable. I did learn a lesson about spice though. At a rural bus stop, a woman said a dish was quote-unquote a little spicy. I assumed she meant white people spicy. She did not. I struggled to finish it. It was also mind-boggling to watch a lady in a sidecar kitchen whip up 3 different meals in under 5 minutes. Cambodia, traditional food was pretty hard to find but still tasty. The Happy Pizza, however, definitely lived up to its name, made me very happy for about a night. Vietnam, this felt very familiar since my mom's a big fan of Vietnamese cuisine, but it was still great. The rule of thumb held true here: the fewer dishes on the menu, the better the food. The 2 places we visited that only had one thing on the menu was arguably the best food I'd ever eaten. Malaysia/Indonesia, I'm lumping in together because I didn't spend too much time in either of them. I noticed that their portions were generally smaller, but the flavors were rich and spicy. Language was never an issue for us. Most people spoke some English, especially in the touristy areas, and I learned the basic greetings, thank you, and how to say no thank you, more importantly. The funny thing was, in every country, someone would start talking to me in the local language. Apparently, I'm the most ambiguous looking Asian person alive. Right up until I get a confused look on my face and pull out Google Translate, the true hero of this trip. Culturally, things just clicked. Greeting people with a clasped hand bow felt natural and respectful. Haggling became second nature, surprisingly fast, though dealing with the hassling was tougher. Found a rhythm, hands up, no thank you in their language, and just keep walking. And lastly, the traffic. It moves like a river. Crossing the street was terrifying at first, but the trick is to just walk slowly and never stop. They just flow around you. One of the hardest part was balancing my own time with traveling with friends. I usually see myself as my own best companion, but doing more group activities like malls and cooking classes was a great shift. The trip also hit me with a sense of perspective, seeing how recent and raw the history of the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnam War still is, and how people are building something better from the pain was powerful. It drove home a simple truth. At the end of the day, we're all just people. Some of the strongest connections were actually with other travelers. To Billy, Ostaf, the three Aussie girls, Ro, and that American girl, oh, and the couple that just got married when we were there. I hope you are all still out there having an incredible journey. Sharing those moments was unforgettable for me. But I also learned so much more from the locals. Our Cambodian guide Kiss told us his story about the Khmer Rouge, his time as a child soldier, and rebuilding his life to eventually become a Buddhist monk. I hope he keeps sharing that story so that it may never be forgotten. In Vietnam, a guy named Gu taught me about the war through his own family's loss. How his grandmother and her daughters died in a bomb shelter, and how people later turned the craters into fish farms. Coming from South Korea, I could relate. War is terrible, but we persevere for a better future and live the best life we can. Most of the time, there was a real pattern of under-promise and over-deliver hospitality. But the attitude towards tourists was complicated. Hassling got worse as we went from Thailand to Cambodia and Bali, and as Gu put it, tourism brings money. But there are two sides to the story. We saw tourists treating locals horribly, and we saw locals who clearly just saw tourists as wallet with legs. Some spots the over-tourism was so obvious, you couldn't blame them for being fed up. Each country just had its own tone. It's very hard to explain. Something you could just feel by looking at the sky. Cambodia felt wide and flat. Thailand had this sense of freedom, and Malaysia felt more closed in. But it was impossible to ignore the impact of tourism, especially in Patong. The damage was easy to see. Dirty water, dead coral, beaches covered in rubbish. Compared to back home in New Zealand, there was a stark difference. At best, Patong is a glorified amusement park. At worst, it's a grotesque reflection of excess. Even as a morning person, I found myself slipping into its nocturnal rhythm, where the streets pulse with an artificial life, like a casino floor designed to keep you distracted and spending. It's a relentless repeat of weed shops, 7-Elevens, and massage parlors crammed into every alleyway and corner. Even the ocean felt touched by it. A friend who swam in Patong Beach said the water felt disgusting. I don't even need to step in to see what she meant, and yet, for all of its flaws, Patong never felt unsafe. Even on Bangla Road, with all its chaos and unspoken transactions, I never felt in danger. Maybe that's its strange appeal, a place to sink into excess without fear. On a smaller scale, sustainability was tough. Everything came wrapped in unnecessary plastic. Trying to refuse a straw often got me looked like I was asking for something completely bizarre. In terms of transport, Grab was my go-to, and it never let me down. Reliable, quick, and I didn't get scammed once. The 25-hour bus ride to Chiang Mai and back to Phuket were interesting, to say the least. Definitely not for everyone, but I'm glad I got myself to experience it. Grab bike is also a thing if you are comfortable with it, but let's be real, if you break your head, you die. And they're not always gonna have a spare helmet to throw your way, so take that into consideration. In Thailand especially, Grab rides can take a while to arrive, so build in some extra time. Elsewhere it was quick and easy. There are also alternative travel options available like the Blue Bus in Phuket, as well as the different airport transports available in different parts of the world, which I found to be much cheaper than taking a taxi, though a bit more inconvenient because they're not always exactly there when you want them. Air travel was mostly smooth as well. Jetstar at the start of the trip was unfortunately bafflingly incompetent, but after that things quickly improved. AirAsia had the smallest seats known to mankind, and I'm convinced they'd make them shrink further if possible to fit 5 more people in the plane, and this somehow made Jetstar look good, which I didn't think was possible. Malaysia Airlines, on the other hand, was awesome. I put it on par with Korean Air personally. Airports were an eye-opener in general for me, as in most countries after immigration you just walk right out. A very trust me bro system compared to New Zealand or Australia, where clearing security and biosecurity always takes at least 30 minutes on a good day. Check-in and security were usually smooth as well. Vietnam's system felt the oldest, while Malaysia's were the best. Auto gates everywhere, no need to talk to an officer if you have the right passport, and internet was reliable just about everywhere in the airport. Some packaged adventures were disappointing to say the least in terms of tourist attractions, like the ATV/Flying Fox/rafting one that we did, which involved a long drive for very short amount of activities, plus surprise upcharges. But most tours exceeded expectations for me. Angkor Wat with Kiss, the cooking classes, and the elephant experience in Thailand are going to be unforgettable for me. Temples and other iconic spots were often crowded, but they're famous for a reason, and all worth seeing. The biggest letdown was actually Bana Hills. It was expensive for a 2-night stay, and cold mist limited visibility almost the entire time we were there. But honestly, I loved it. The mist made it mystical, almost surreal. I imagine others would have preferred sunshine, but for me, it was just such a unique experience. On the other hand, for my off-the-beaten-path travel, renting motorcycles in Thailand and Vietnam was definitely a highlight for me. It let me wander into rice fields in tight alleyways I'd never have seen on a tour or a Grab ride. Those unplanned detours turned into some of my fondest memories. There are reasons why tourist spots are crowded. They're worth it, but quiet, forgotten places have their own kind of magic. In Thailand, I stumbled across 2 completely empty temples. Sitting there in silence with nothing but my own thoughts was louder than any crowd I could imagine. It reminded me how rare true peace and quiet had become in my life. Learning the history, both ancient and modern, was highlight of the trip. Ancient history clearly shapes people's identities today, while modern history still affects daily life. One fascinating detail was how colonialism shaped languages across the region. Museums and monuments told stories you don't hear elsewhere, and always from the people's perspective. Vietnam especially stood out. The way the war is remembered there is completely different from how I was taught. Seeing that side of history was heartbreaking. Recent tragedies, not as conflicts, but as survival. Our Cambodian guide Kiss also gave me insights I'd never have gotten anywhere else. He spoke about Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge, and the Civil War, and how its shadow still lingers, but also about the great kings of ancient Khmer, and how they laid the foundations of today's society. Talking to him was a reminder that history isn't just in books, it's lived and remembered in people. Overall, costs across Southeast Asia were fairly consistent, but with some quirks. Malaysia felt most expensive, though electronics were cheapest. Thailand easily had the cheapest food and legitimate massages, plus endless 7-Elevens for your convenience. Cambodia was a bit odd, with USD being used everywhere and Riel feeling like a side currency despite being their national currency. Accommodations and grabs were cheap, though Wise didn't support Riel, so that was also made a bit difficult. Vietnam had the most variable pricing, I feel. Family-run shops meant food and clothing could swing wildly in cost. Food could be cheaper than Thailand, and grab rides or motorbike rentals were incredibly cheap as well. Indonesia was similar, dirt cheap food next to shops charging 5 times more. Circle K's and mini-marts were everywhere, and Grab might have been the cheapest of them all. Accommodation ate up most of the money, really. I could have survived on under $50 New Zealand a day, including food and stay, but my average was closer to 100. Daily massages didn't really help. Well, daily, but at least 2-3 times a week. But let's be honest, part of the reason you travel here is so that your money stretches much further. I wasn't too strict about my budgeting. We were still being paid as teachers during the holidays, so it's basically just making sure not to run out of money before the payday. Staying under 100 New Zealand dollars a day was the lose target, and I don't really stress if I went over, so it wasn't too big of a deal. There was certainly some hidden costs involved in my trip. ATM fees in Thailand adds up very quickly. Just withdraw large amounts and do the math and get it turned into smaller, usable money at 7-Elevens. Generally speaking, cash is king. Carry enough, but just stash it in different areas. ATMs will usually spit out huge bills. Like I said, make sure you split it up before you go to a small-time vendor. In Vietnam especially, notes look similar as well, and these things lead to scams. Always say the denominations out loud and try to give exact change or ask for change before handing over big notes if you can. Last thing I want to mention is responsible tourism. I saw a few things that genuinely pissed me off. The loud, publicly drunk Aussies, a Russian couple abusing monkeys with a stick and a water bottle, entitled tourists snapping at workers. Honestly, it costs nothing to follow the rules and not be a dickhead. We also came across elephant riding in Thailand, and I would say very much ethically dubious, as it puts a lot of stress on the elephants. Luckily for us, it wasn't offered at any of the places that we stopped by, but it was heartbreaking to see that people were still indulging in these practices. I wish people would do a little research before hopping on the back of those poor animals. Lastly, in Cambodia, we saw child beggars and women with babies sitting outside supermarkets. Our guide warned us that these were often part of an organized ring. The kids technically have access to free schooling, but it's rarely their first choice. It's hard to watch and harder to know what the right response is. This trip gave me a new appreciation for things I had taken for granted, like clean water from the tap. It was also a chance to do some self-reflection. Keeping a daily diary forced me to think about my actions and reactions. It reminded me to keep challenging my preconceived notions and test them through lived experiences, not assumptions. For me, it was less about one big event and more about the accumulation of small reminders. I don't need a rigid plan. If you walk around any town, you'll stumble into something worthwhile. Planless, do more. Would I go back? Definitely, but to different areas. This trip felt like a great scouting run. For me, the biggest takeaways though was how much time I wasted back home. YouTube, manga, distractions. Meanwhile, I have a million things I want to do that never get touched. This trip made me realize how much life is slipping by when I could just get things done. At the end of it all, I came home with a clearer view of the world's vastness. In a way, I felt like a lost kid walking back through the front door, smaller, but also more awake. I hope you enjoyed this, I hope you got something out of it, and thank you for watching. Take care.